Good morning and welcome to Coffee with Rich. Today we're joined by Dr. John Edeen. Did I say that right, sir?
Absolutely. You got it.
Okay, good. Awesome. All right, well, we're waiting for folks to jump on here. I'm going to go ahead and get set up. Let's see. Good morning and welcome. There we go. All right, that worked out. We got one person jumping on already. Good morning and welcome. And welcome to all those that have watched the replays. I really appreciate that as well. Let's see who is on so far. Gilly is joining us from the Philippines. Good morning, Gilly. Semper Fi, brother. Back at you. Glad to have you on the show. Kevin is on. Let's see if I can fix this here. And today we are joined with Dr. John Edeen from Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership, among many other things, and I'm going to let him introduce himself in just a moment. Let's make sure we're completely set up here. Okay, we got 12 people on. We are ready to roll on this beautiful Friday morning. Dr. Edeen, could you introduce yourself, sir?
Sure. Yeah, my name is John Edeen. I am a pediatric orthopedic surgeon. I practice in San Antonio, Texas. I've been here for just short of 23 years. I'm also the membership director for Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership, and I've been in that position probably for about 5 years now. I was born in Quincy, Massachusetts, and grew up in northern New Jersey, and I had no real, gun exposure as a kid. My parents were Salvation Army officers, actually. And so, I grew up in that environment. I played football in high school, and my high school actually had a crew team. And I actually went to Columbia University for my undergraduate degree and rode on the crew team there. I rode varsity crew for 3 years. After that, I went to Columbia College of Physicians and Surgeons for my medical school. And I graduated there in 1985. And then in order to pay for medical school, since my parents were Salvation Army officers, I actually went through the Health Professions Scholarship Program. And so after graduation, I went to Oakland Naval Hospital to do my internship and then spent 2 years as the medical officer aboard the USS Peleliu, which is an amphibious assault ship, LHA. Rich may be familiar with that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And I made a Westpac deployment in 1988. We went to the Philippines. So our friends from the Philippines, hello. She spent quite a bit of time in the Philippines. Went to Hong Kong, went to Korea, Guam, came back, stopped off in Hawaii on the way back, did a Tiger cruise back from Hawaii to and the ship was home port in Long Beach. So it was a Western Pacific ship. After that, I went and did my orthopedic residency at Oakland Naval Hospital. That's 4 years worth of training. And then after I finished my training, I was an orthopedic surgeon at NAS Jacksonville, Florida. And I made a Western Pacific, I made a surgical team deployment to Somalia. Right at the end when we were pulling out, we were in there in support of getting our guys out. And one of my buddies was actually the orthopedic surgeon on the beach, so it was kind of fun to connect with him again. He was an Army guy, and I was a Navy guy. He trained at Letterman Army Hospital. After that, I spent a little bit of time in northwestern Iowa until I did my pediatric fellowship at the Shriners Hospital for children in Springfield, Massachusetts. And interestingly, I did my interview for my fellowship via satellite off the coast of Mogadishu at the time. So that was kind of an interesting thing. And then after that, I come here to San Antonio for the last 23 years and practicing in children's orthopedics. When I came here, I didn't have all this gray stuff. And I had dark hair and I was young and enthusiastic. Now I'm old and jaded.
I hear you. Guys, so everybody give a warm Warrior Nation welcome to Dr. John Edeen. And before we go much further, please like and share. Got a good show for you today. And if you're an American Warrior Society coin member, put your coin number up there and let me know where you're from this morning. I'm going to welcome some folks on.
Yep. I'm 1790, by the way, and I wanted 1791 for the, ratification of the Constitution. I missed it by 1 year. Oh, well.
Yeah. Let's see who we got here. Jared is on. Mike is on. Razmik is on. Will Rhodes, Will Parker. Good morning, brother, out there in Montana. Gerald is on out in Oregon. Kevin, let's see who else. Les is on. Matt is on. Gilly says, sweet, you were deployed in the Philippines too, like Rich. Yeah, man. We used to go there a lot, but not so much anymore. Gene is on. Kevin is on. Got 32 people on this morning. Please like and share. We're going to jump right on into it. Got a good show here today. So we went through, how did you get involved? Like I said, I think you said you're from Quincy, Massachusetts. That's not necessarily a gun-friendly community.
No, I only lived there for a few years. I actually spent most of my life in northern New Jersey, which is not much better.
No,
not much better. So part of it was in the military after the Rodney King riots in 1992. Mm-hmm. One of my colleagues and I used to play racquetball together, and he dislocated his kneecap. And so we couldn't play racquetball anymore. So he said, hey, let's go up to the Oakland Hills range up here and let's shoot some guns. So we shot some guns. And then I got to thinking, maybe I need to get me something too. So I picked up a Beretta 92. And I was able to keep that on base because at that time I was living at the Oakland Naval Hospital base housing. And so that's kind of where I got started. And then when I moved to Jacksonville, I started buying more and more, and I joined a gun club and started shooting. And I bought a rifle, and I bought, all this stuff. And then when I moved to Texas, I bought more guns in Iowa. And then when I moved to Texas, of course, I had even more guns. And, it became a little bit of a passion. I started doing some training in 2010. I got my concealed license, I think, in 2007, and did a little bit of training during that course. Actually, one of my neighbors put on a training course on his ranch and brought like a guy that was a former Army Special Forces and a Texas State Trooper. Both they did the instruction, but then I did some front sight stuff, and then I did some stuff with Rob Pincus, and I've done a lot of training. I've got over 1,000 hours of firearms training now under my belt in the last 10 years. But the 2A thing really started. I started listening to podcasts in about 2010, and Rob. Mark Walters used to travel around and go to these events at the Gander Mountain stores. And he went to one out in Spring, Texas, which is a Houston suburb. And my partner and I went out. This was like in 2013. We went out and I met Mark, and we kind of hit it off and, had some good conversations. And in fact, I was waiting for Rob Pincus to show up because I wanted to talk to him about taking some of his courses, which I did later on that year. And Mark invited me to come to the NRA meeting, and he was at I think the Crossbead Holsters booth, and I walk up and talk to him, and he goes, "Oh, John, I want you to meet somebody. This is Masad Ayub." And I'm like, "Whoa!" And so I met Masad Ayub, and now I've taken his Mag 180 class and his instructor class. So I've been through his highest level of training classes. I've done pretty much all of his stuff. At least most of it anyway. And then at the end, Mark says, you should come to this gun rights policy conference thing that's going to be here in Houston in September. And I think you would really enjoy it. I think, you're the kind of guy that would really benefit from it. So I fortunately wasn't on call that weekend. So I decided to drive out to Houston, and there was a guy there. His name was Tim Wheeler, and he's the founder of Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership. And at the time, I was really struggling with the whole concept of the gun-free zones in hospitals thing. I had talked to the hospital CEOs and saying, hey, look, the Texas law says that you can give people permission in writing to carry firearms. And I think we should allow some individuals to be able to carry. And unfortunately, big hospitals are also big corporations. And so the lawyers are like, nah, no, we're covered by those 30-06 signs. That's okay. That'll keep the bad guys out. Just the 30-06 sign. So that kind of went down in flames. And so it's kind of lit a fire under me. So when Tim came off the stage after giving his speech, I said, Tim, my name is John Edeen. I'm a pediatric orthopedic surgeon. How can I help? And Tim's eyes got really big. His jaw dropped. He goes, you know how rare you are? I said, I don't care. I want to help. What can I do to help? And so that's how I got started. And so he helped me draft a resolution that I presented to our county medical society about getting rid of gun-free zones. And so after I presented it, it was voted down 22-2. And so I was in a little bit of despair. I got on the phone with Tim and I said, Tim, they killed it. They killed it 22-2. Even some of my pediatric colleagues voted it down, which is another story in and of itself, which I'll get to in a minute. So he says, well, don't worry about it. I says, there's more things that you can do. And so I was organizing these training classes with a couple of instructor friends of mine, Ben Brandon and Bob May. They both do podcasts. They're very active in training and just, two-way stuff. And so we had 15, 20 people sign up for a weekend class, and it was really good. And one day, one of the doctors that voted this thing down shows up at the class. He signs up and shows up because apparently his brother-in-law is stalking the family because I guess he wants money out of them. All of a sudden, the Second Amendment becomes a little bit more of an important thing. Let's just leave it at that. And then I started writing. When things kind of struck me like this, like the first article I wrote was something called "Unthinkable: An Active Shooter in a Hospital." I actually started reading about all this stuff and kind of getting myself. It's all part of the education process because if you're going to be an advocate, you need to educate yourself. You need to read about what's going on. And in July of 2014, we had that shooting in the hospital in Pennsylvania, where Dr. Lee Silverman defended himself. He ended up getting shot. The bad guy killed like a social worker, shot her in the face, and he pulls his revolver out and gets into a gunfight with the guy. And they eventually end up subduing him, but that was a gun-free zone. Yeah. And fortunately for him, in Pennsylvania, the signs don't have the weight of law. In Texas, they do. In Texas, in a hospital, it's a Class A misdemeanor. And about 4 years ago, the Texas legislature actually lowered most of the gun-free zone violations to Class C, which is like a $200 fine, except for places like hospitals and nursing homes and certain other places. So hospitals still carry a heavier penalty, and that's like a year in jail and a $10,000 fine and losing your firearms, carry privileges for 5 years or something like that. So that was the inspiration, and so I looked at what are these active shooter things all about? I hate to call them active shooters, but that's kind of the vernacular. These guys are killers. They're murderers. They're out there to do mass murder. And, Lieutenant Dan Marco talked about the stages that these guys go through. The first one is fantasy, where they kind of dream this thing up. They think it up. And a lot of times they do a lot of research. And then it's the planning phase where they actually figure out what do I need to pull this off. And then the preparation phase where they start gathering things. They may get their guns, their ammunition, explosives, all that kind of stuff. And then there's the approach phase where they're actually moving towards their intended target. And right up until then, you can stop one of these things, by intervention. The last one, of course, is the attack itself. And the only way you're going to stop that is actually to have somebody who's armed be there to stop the thing. And, we know that these things happen fast and they're violent and they're ugly. Like the Gabrielle Giffords, 6 people were killed and 13 were wounded in 15 seconds. Yeah. I mean, that's just fast. And if you look at the numbers, if there's somebody, an armed response in the place that it's happening, maybe 2 or 3 people on average are killed. But if you have to wait for the police to show up, that's 12 to 15. And I don't know if you know Ed Monk. Ed Monk is a former Army officer, law enforcement, and teacher. And he's up in Arkansas. And he's actually looked at all these active shooter events. And he's got it down to the second, the number of people. Very, very well thought out. Very, very good. I heard him first at Range Master Tactical Conference. But you guys should look him up and look at his work. He does a lot of good stuff. He'll go out and give his talk too, as far as his the information that he's gathered. So if you're looking at a hospital, you're looking at a place that's very difficult to defend. There's long hallways. There's it's a bad place. And the Homeland Security gives you the run, hide, fight thing.
Mhm.
So well, if you're in a hospital bed and you just had surgery, you're not running anywhere. Most of the doors don't really lock, right? So you can't hide. And how are you going to fight?
Right.
You don't have. They've disarmed you. Now, fortunately, in my hospital in the last 5 years, security has gotten a lot better. There's a lot more locking doors. Let's say, with electronic locks on it, but they're easily defeated. All you have to do is get a card from somebody that you shoot, and now you have access. And so again, it's more security theater. It's easy. I guess it's good for traffic flow and kind of law-abiding people, but it's not going to stop a bad guy, because the first person they're going to find a hospital employee with a badge, and now they've got access. And so this is pretty bad. So if you do find yourself and you are able to get out of here, you need to think about your escape routes in advance. Fortunately, there are a lot of entrances and exits in most hospitals. Especially fire exits. Most of those stairwells do go out somewhere. So, when I look at this thing, I think of it as a kind of a moral issue too. As a doctor, it's my duty to take care of my patients and also to look after my staff. And the fact that they disarm us and make it so that we can't protect ourselves and our patients and our colleagues, I think is somewhat immoral, and it's really disingenuous to say that the 30-06 sign is going to stop a bad guy. Okay, it works right up until the time it doesn't, and they're going to be finding this stuff out here pretty soon. I can tell you that some of these riots are going to ending up at a hospital sooner or later. And they are not prepared to deal with any of this stuff.
And let's talk about that real quick, because in our pre-show, John, and for the listener out there that's watching us this morning, you wrote a very good article called "In the Crosshairs: Our Hospitals Targets for Terrorist Attack," and I believe it was published in Concealed Carry Magazine. Is that correct?
Yeah, in 2016 in the summertime.
And I was going to say, if just the listener, if you want to find it, you can go on the Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership website and actually pull that article down. And I want to bring you back on to discuss that, because I think there's so much to go into as I was reading that article this morning over coffee. But what I really want to touch on now is something that you kind of skirted around the issue a little about gun-free zones specifically.
Right.
Talk to me about that.
Well, the gun-free zone in schools was actually an act passed, and I think George Bush signed it, and I think that was actually proposed by Joe Biden. He was one of the co-sponsors in the Senate. So this is where we're at. So this was the gun-free zone concept is a nice thought.
It is.
Wouldn't it be nice that we can protect children in schools by putting a sign up? But it's actually had the opposite effect, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It's actually turned them into killing zones, because the bad guys, who are not stupid, they may be deranged or crazy or psychopathic, but they're not stupid. They see this as an easy target. And so, we've seen lots of schools be targets of, all the way back to Columbine, even with armed school resource officers. All they got to do is wait for this SRO to take a lunch break, and they can barricade. The guys at Columbine had bombs that actually didn't work, fortunately, but they wanted to blow things up. They wanted to shoot people. They ended up shooting a bunch of people. But once you gain entrance and you can barricade, then you got all the time in the world to do the bad things that you want to do. And then we talk about this, the stopwatch of death and all this rapid mass murder stuff that, and it's like every 6 seconds, somebody's getting shot in these events. And you saw it in, the school down in Florida. We've seen it at, Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
Once these guys are inside and they're able to trap a population, it's game over. They have plenty of time, and they're very methodical about it. There was a terrorist attack in a hospital in Kabul, Afghanistan. There was 2 interns who let the bad guys in. They dressed up as doctors, and they went around from floor to floor stabbing and shooting people. It's interesting that everybody who was killed, but there was one floor that wasn't killed, and it was the Taliban guys.
Wow. Shocker.
Yeah, that's a shocker. Nobody was injured on the Taliban floor, but everybody else, and they had like 6 or 7 hours by the time the military got there and got in there to, and most of these guys killed themselves anyway. Some of them had some, bomb vests and all this kind of stuff. But, so a lot of times all the security measures can be circumvented by somebody on the inside.
That's true.
And, although it was a gun-free zone, it wasn't really a gun-free zone.
Yeah.
Like I said, these gun-free zones work great right up until the time they don't.
That's true. Let's see who's on here this morning. Dr. Edeen, let's see. We got Scott from Nashville. Jared, Scott, you're just up the road, pal. Jared, of course. Doug Lightfoot is on. Good morning, Doug. Brett is on, says Jeffrey Young is on. Jim is on. Coin number 182 from South Bend, Indiana. Wow, that is amazing. Ted is on. Tiny says, locks only keep honest people honest. Yeah. Gerald says, with a name like 30-06, you would view defenseless. Brett says, when I read gun-free zones, I think killing zones, so I go the other way. Yeah. John says, I'm a graduate of Virginia Tech. Not sure if you were there on that terrible day. And John says, please like and share. We've got a few minutes remaining with Dr. Edeen. I want to be respectful of his time. I know that he's a practicing surgeon, so I believe he's got to go and do some amazing things today. Gun rights in general, John, what is Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership doing in regard to gun rights? Okay.
Well, I like to call us the anti-Bloomberg School of Public Health. Okay. Because when those guys put out articles, our guys tear them apart and expose them for the biased garbage that they are. Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership got it started in 1994. And Tim Wheeler, who practiced ear, nose, and throat surgery in California, realized that there was a tremendous bias against the Second Amendment in the medical community. He was one of the 4 people that testified in front of the congressional committee that got the Dickey Amendment passed, defunding the CDC's biased, quote unquote, research, which is basically advocacy for gun control. And so that's how we got started. Our website, we put out an article twice a week on our website, and it also goes up on our Facebook page. Plus, we'll find some interesting stuff and put it up on our Facebook page every day. So there's always some good conversation on our Facebook page, and it's drgo.us is our website, and it's DRGO for Facebook. So you can look that up. But we've done amicus briefs on a lot of cases. There was this case of Docs versus Clocks down in Florida that unfortunately the 11th Circuit overturn the law, except for saying that doctors can't discriminate against people just because they don't answer the gun, do you own a gun question. But, so we do advocacy stuff as far as, pro 2A. And then also we have a little service that we do. It's called 2adoc.com, where we actually match patients with 2A friendly doctors.
Well, let me ask you, John, not to cut you off, but how do you answer that question? If I go for my, I'm 50, so if I go for my just turned 50 physical, what do I do if my doctor asks me if I own a gun and they're right?
Right. Well, first of all, you basically say that that's really not germane to why we're here. And so, you can basically refuse to answer the question. A lot of people say none ya business. Okay. However, if you really want to push the thing, there's something called a boundary violation or ethical boundary violation, which is, in this case, it's pushing a political agenda that may not necessarily be to the benefit of your patient. And so that's a pretty serious thing. Here's another boundary violation: having sex with your patient. Okay. It's serious. Okay. So you can actually report them to the state medical board for a boundary violation if you really want to push the envelope. And then David Kodria, who's a pretty well-known writer, put together a questionnaire that is just awesome. And you can hand them this questionnaire that basically says, I have not had any training in firearm safety and storage and all this kind of stuff, and I'm still giving you advice. My insurance company does or does not cover me under these circumstances in case I am harmed by your advice. And you stick that under their nose and ask them to sign it. Usually they will back off.
Yeah.
So that form is actually in. Let me pull up the article here. In AmmoLand.
Oh, okay.
It's on AmmoLand. It's pro-gun owning physicians decry docs versus Glocks ruling from February 22nd, 2017 by David Kodria. So if you want to look for that form, you can find it there, and you can hand that to your doctor. Pediatricians are notorious for this. The American Academy of Pediatrics is very, very anti-2A. They are probably the worst, followed closely by the American Medical Association. And it's interesting how all these kind of big doctor academic groups are anti-Second Amendment. And they've been that way since the 1980s, by the way. This is nothing new. And this is part of the reason why Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership has come into an existence, and it's growing and growing. And we're getting new people every day sign up, and people who want to participate. We've got people in all different specialties. Psychiatrists and psychologists are actually pretty are very involved, and their organization is also very anti-2A. The psychiatry, it was at AAPA or whatever it is, but they're also anti-2A. But we get a lot of psychiatrists because these guys see this stuff and they understand that this is a lot of bogus, BS. That all these laws and these policies do absolutely nothing to stop violence, and the whole public health thing about gun violence. Nothing a doctor does. The only thing that the way a doctor can decrease murder rate is to save people's lives in the emergency room and in the OR.
That's right.
And actually, Dr. Grossman, David Grossman, talks about that in a lot of his stuff. Is that one of the reasons why the murder rate is going down isn't because less people are getting shot. It's because medical care is better. If we were getting 70s medical care instead of 2020 medical care, there would be a lot more deaths on the streets from this stuff. People are carrying tourniquets now, cops and ambulance people. That alone saves a lot of lives.
No, I think that's an interesting point. Let's see. I'm going to read some comments here. Let's see. Brett says, I tell them it's none of your business when it comes to talking to doctors. Les says, Dr. Edeen is indeed an uber valuable player in the 2A advocacy. Thanks, Rich, for having him on. Jim says, I tell my doc, yes, I wear seatbelts in my vehicle. Let's see. Rasmus says, please share the form with us, but I think you just did. John says, good morning from Marylandistan, coin number 308. Jeff says, recently I had my 50-year checkup and that question wasn't asked. Now that I think about it, I was wearing a Glock logo shirt, so ... Ted said, never been asked. I have never been asked either, but I hear that especially in the VA, if you're struggling with a mental health issue, you're going to get asked that question.
Yeah, and there was under the Obama administration, there was actually a pretty good push to disarm a lot of the veterans, anybody with any kind of psychiatric anything.
Yeah.
They were reporting them to NICS, and whether they were dangerous to themselves or others or not, which I think is a violation of HIPAA, first of all.
Sure.
For those who you don't know, HIPAA is basically the confidentiality of medical information. But the government doesn't abide by their own laws.
No.
They do whatever they want to do, and this is part of the problem.
Yep. That's a fact. I will tell you, as a recruiting officer, I was in constant contact with people's HIPAA information all the time, just in order to make decisions as to whether this person needs to be granted enlistment or not. But I think HIPAA, John, doesn't even require that there's any kind of intent. It's just that you take the medical record outside the facility or something like that. So someone could accidentally, a physician like yourself could accidentally do that and be a HIPAA violation. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, just think about the number of laptops that are stolen out of people's cars that may have, ability to access. I know the VA had that happen.
Oh yeah,
where they, they had millions of records potentially compromised, and that's,
I got a letter from OPM saying that mine was one of them. I mean, but what do you do at that point?
Yeah, no, there's nothing you can do other than hope that they were not able to access the information and that you don't have anything damning in there.
Right.
I mean, medical information in and of itself is something that terrorists are looking after. That's part of the terrorism against hospitals thing, is that, the getting access to medical information, and those hospitals have huge computer systems with tons of data about people. And if you can get access to that stuff, that could be used later on as blackmail or whatever, depending on, what your health problem is, especially if you're somebody important that may be political or whatever, they're not above doing that.
Yeah.
So.
Now, Gerald does say he has been asked that up in Oregon. Jim says, did the same with my wife and kids. Ted said, I get pressure to help medical providers like ladies RNs to select and learn how to use a firearm safely. Yeah, I think anyone in our community that can teach responsible gun ownership and gun handling. But I want to ask you, John, as a final question here this morning, what's the future for 2A or for your organization? Where do you see this going in the current climate?
Well, I think there are a lot of doctors that are closet gun owners in places like Massachusetts and California and Washington and Oregon and Maryland. I'm sure a lot of your, AWS members are doctors.
Oh, yeah, they are.
Yeah. I mean, we're out there. And why is that? Because we see the crap that happens, how man's inability to, not respect man. There's the criminal element, and instead of public health, we really need to be looking at criminology and economics and that kind of stuff. Those are the people that actually have a better handle on this, quote unquote, gun crime problem, which is not a gun problem. It's a crime problem.
That's right.
And the other problem is that when you're in states like Minnesota and New York, it's a revolving door criminal justice system. So, in New York, you commit a crime, you're out that day without even any bail. I mean, it's, how crazy is that? And you're wondering why crime's going up, and then of course, now with this COVID-19 thing, they're letting all these people out of jail. So now you have the perfect storm, right? You have people locked down for 2 or 3 months, losing their jobs, getting desperate. You're putting all the criminals out on the street. If you're in a state that limits people's ability to defend themselves by either making it very difficult to get a firearm or make it impossible to get a concealed carry firearm, people are being victimized, and now we got the Antifa dudes out there rolling down the streets, burning down places. This is it's a scary thing. This is kind of a novel book territory. People write about stuff like this, and it's happening right now. So
yeah, that's absolutely correct. Gosh, you brought up a point I wanted to address. I'm having a senior moment.
That's okay. I have a lot of those. I'm a little older than you too, so I get them more frequently.
Yeah. Gosh, you just brought up a great point. Oh, I will say, I think that I know what it was with regard to COVID and the current climate and Antifa and all the things that we are bombarded with on the news every day. It seems like I'm seeing a lot of people nudging in our direction and I'm speaking specifically to Californians who before were all about gun, whatever you call it, gun control, that now they're scared and they want to get a gun, and then they realize when they need it or they want it, they can't go and get it. And I'm hoping that will swing some of them in our direction. What do you think?
I hope so too, and I think that already a lot of the very responsible people in our industry, in our group have, like the guys from Polite Society podcast did something called Guns 101, and they got all kinds of instructors from all over the place to kind of educate people about gun handling and safety rules, and how do you what kind of gun, and rifles and pistols and the whole 9 yards. And so we need to open our arms and to welcome those people in, to educate them, because really the only way we're going to keep our rights is political. Yep. We need to have the numbers, and unfortunately the money is on the anti-right side. You got Bloomberg, you got Soros, you got the guys up in Washington State. All the Microsoft people. They all have tons of money, and they're that's part of the reason why Washington got turned, because of all the money that was put into their proposition, whatever it was, 1595 or whatever. I can't remember the number of it, but it was a pretty horrible law that really gutted the Second Amendment in the state of Washington. And they're willing to do that anywhere. I live in Texas, and Texas is one of the states that's under the microscope that they're going to be throwing money at to try to flip our federal representatives and maybe even our Senate. John Cornyn's up this year. He may not be the best two-way guy, but he's certainly better than anybody else that Democrats are going to put up.
Well, you bring up the point about Washington State, and several years ago, my partner, Mike Seeklander, and I went up and taught a week-long shooting course to Seattle PD, Tacoma, Seattle Port Police, etc. And, at the time, they recognized my Tennessee carry permit, but now they don't. And, we taught in Portland, Oregon, a group of LEOs.
Yeah, they don't recognize anybody's in Oregon.
No, and then I went to, we were in New Jersey toward the end of last year.
Another place. It doesn't recognize anything.
No, and we were training a group of, I won't say what agency, but a group of federal folks in a week-long course. And, of course, every morning we'd go to their armory and they would issue us whatever we wanted and stuff. But when we left the facility every day, we're completely disarmed. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, it doesn't make any sense to you, but it makes perfect sense to them, because they want you to be victimized. They want you to be controlled, because it's all about gun control. Is not about guns; it's about control. True. And it's really all about control and dependence. And if you really look at what's going on in these states, you notice it's all the blue governor states that are staying locked down, and it's because of control. It's trying to destroy the economy. Also, a lot of these governments are upside down on their retirement funds, and so what they're looking for, a federal bailout is what they're really looking for. And so they're willing to put their economy into a total tailspin for two reasons. One is to see if they can get federal money, and two is to make Trump look bad and to try to swing the election. This is all about politics. This has nothing to do with the poor guy, Mr. Floyd, who was killed. This was just an excuse, and there have been several, police or, racial killings lately And why didn't things explode then? Why now? It's because they had everything in place and they were prepared. Do I sound like a conspiracy theorist? Maybe. But is there a conspiracy? Could there be a conspiracy? Absolutely. We know that George Soros has said he wants to tear down the U.S. and he's got billions of dollars. And he's, my question is, why isn't the federal government going after him right now? If it's in the news and people already know about it, there's got to be some evidence somewhere. You have to follow the money trail. Those bricks don't just show up because, out of thin air. Somebody paid for them and somebody put them there.
That's right.
And, there's video cameras everywhere. If they can't figure out who did it, this is what the FBI needs to be doing.
Agreed.
Because the problem is that a lot of these state governments, they're kind of willing accomplices. I mean, telling the cops to back off and let them burn down the downtown. That's not what the cops want to do. The cops want to go in there and stop this, but it's their political masters that are the ones that are actually the ones that are in charge. And those guys have to follow the orders. If you look at police chiefs, they're political appointees and they have to do what the people who appoint them are. Otherwise they're gone and they'll just get another guy to do what they want them to do. And that's the difference between the sheriff and the police chief. Sheriff is elected, and they need to be able to answer to the public, and they are answerable to the public rather than the police chief, who really isn't. They're answerable to the city council and the mayor, and that's a big difference. And that's why a lot of these big cities are burning.
Yeah, but I don't understand how if a mayor says, let them go, let them burn it, and orders a pullback, then why is him or whoever his decision makers were held accountable to every damage, every death, every business that burns? You know what I mean? I don't understand that.
Because they're in safe districts.
Yeah.
They're overwhelmingly Democrat districts. Not every Democrat is bad, but we know that the leadership is anti-U.S. We know that they're anti-Second Amendment. And you have to ask yourself this one question. What do they want to do to us that it requires us to be completely disarmed?
Mm-hmm.
I think we're seeing some of that right now, aren't we?
Yeah. So let's go to the questions here and comments, John. Doug says he's been asked that in Ohio. I'm not surprised. Brett says St. Louis District Attorney Soros puppet release all arrested riders without charge. No one is coming to help you. We are our own first responders. That is the truth.
Yeah, San Antonio has one too. He just got elected this last cycle, and he's a Soros-sponsored guy. Millions and millions of dollars goes a long way when it comes to elections. You can buy elections just by buying advertising, and even if you're defeating a already incumbent, they can do it because they have enough money.
Yeah. Razmik says we had an active shooter. I call him active killer, but I understand that is the vernacular that the FBI wants us to use. One of our local ranges last week, the guy was arrested after a long pursuit. He just got released from jail due to COVID-19 zero bail program. And Razmik, I think I saw a video you had posted about one of your friends in the jewelry business that had their windows smashed and looters coming after jewelry stores. I know that you guys always have to stay armed. Somebody's always wanting to take your valuables there. Gerald says open carry in Oregon, said they don't allow permits from other states. Yeah. When we were in Oregon, Mike and I, we were telling the law enforcement officers in the class, like, it's a shame, we're all going out to lunch and we're having to take off our weapons. And they're like, just open carry. Oregon's open carry. I'm like, we're in Portland, Oregon. I don't think open carry in Portland would have been a good idea, but
it might be a meltdown of some of the snowflakes.
Yeah, exactly. Final thing for you, Dr. Edeen. Tell me about your experience with Jiu Jitsu as of late, because we are a self-defense podcast. So tell us about that. Okay.
Well, I've been going to the Rangemaster Tactical Conference for the last 4 or 5 years, and I've run into some of the, I guess, the grappling people, like guys like Cecil Birch and Steve Moses, and of course listen to you guys too, talk about it. So at age 60, I actually took my first jiu-jitsu class about I guess it was in February, and So I took the first couple of classes, and then I had this nagging thing in my shoulder, and I was grappling with a guy that was a blue belt, and I was doing a 2-leg takedown, and of course I'm 6 feet tall and 285, and he was probably about 5'10" and 175 pounds. Mm-hmm. So I'm going down on top of him, and next thing I know, his knee is in my sternum. Yep. And I land, and I feel all my rib cartilage pop. Oof. You know, so that was hurting me. And then the next time I went, I was rolling with a guy that's pretty good size. He's probably about 185, 190 pounds. And I kind of turned over, and he had his elbow up, and he stuck it right in my rib, and I felt this pop in my rib. So I broke a rib doing that. So I had 3 sessions before I had to kind of stop for a while. Then the COVID-19 thing hit. I just got an MRI on my shoulder and an injection. I got to do a little therapy because I got some tendonitis in my shoulder. But I'm going to get back at it, and I'm going to get back on the mats, and I'm going to get back doing this thing because I need to, you know. Yeah. And I'm going to give it my best shot. Let's put it this way. Hopefully, my old body will hold up.
I hope so, man. And I hope that you inspire a lot of other listeners and viewers out there, Dr. Edeen, to get out there and get on the mats, because
I got to lose a few pounds too. So hopefully that'll help.
Yeah. All right. Well, sir, we've had you on here about 46 minutes. I want to be very respectful of your time, because what you're doing is very important to our community and our society, not only taking care of those children as a pediatric orthopedic surgeon, but also what you do in the 2A community. Any parting comments, sir?
No, just that, I suggest folks go to 2adoc.com. And if you're looking for a doctor, it's a free website. It's confidential. Nobody can. It's non-searchable. We'll match you up with somebody if we have somebody. If you are a doctor, please sign up, because we need providers too. And then the other thing is that drgo.us has a ton of very good information, lots of good articles. We published something called the Position Paper in Favor of Firearm Suppressors to Prevent Hearing Loss. It looks like that, okay? And it basically is a scientific basis of suppressors and why they're the best thing. And it's written by 4 ear, nose, and throat surgeons, 2 of them who are neuro-otologists who deal with sensory neural hearing loss. And so this is the straight skinny. If you want to, when this suppressor thing comes back again sooner or later, this is great info to hand to your politicians. Yes. And there's all kinds of stuff on our website like that. And so please go ahead and visit, join. It's tax deductible. We're part of the Second Amendment Foundation, so it is tax deductible. It's like $35. You don't have to be a doctor, but if you are in the healthcare profession, certainly we would love to have you join. And certainly if you want to write something, if you want to write, we certainly there's an opportunity for that. Our editor is a psychiatrist up in upstate New York. We got people behind enemy lines all over the place. So I'm in a pretty safe place, but a lot of our people we're all over the United States in every state. So.
Well, thank you, sir, for coming on today, and I appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us. And we need to get you back on to talk about your article about In the Crosshairs. Okay. Sure,
we'd love to do that.
Okay. Guys, stay safe out there in Warrior Nation. Again, if you aren't a member of the American Warrior Society, please check out AmericanWarriorSociety.com, the sponsor for today's show. Stay safe, everybody.